Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't help but sit here and think about my evolution as a legislator in this is going into my 5th term, and remembering 2017 in the HB4 fight, and feeling like I was a little too green to share my words honestly back then. When HB4, I knew how dangerous it would be, because I myself, just like Representative Hernandez, remembers those INS sweeps. I was like the neighborhood translator for my community, my immigrant community that I still live in today. My mother would say, go translate one thing or another for our neighborhood. And one day, she asked me to go to her best friend's house, Oralia, because INS was there to pick her up. And they asked me to go because Alejandra, her daughter, was going to be left alone. Somehow, even to this day, as a 49-year-old man, I still remember that day. It was traumatic. I think I was either 10 or 11 years old. And INS left a 4 or 5-year-old girl, Alejandra, there with a 11-year-old boy. And on that day here, when we were arguing HB4, I could only think about the time growing up, and you guys might have heard of this term, might not have heard of this term, rolling Mexicans. Back in the neighborhood during those days, the immigrants knew, undocumented, they knew if they got picked up, they were going to get deported. So they never called the police. So when that Mexican guy got paid on Friday and he was going to go buy his 12-pack, a lot of times when he went around the corner from that convenience store, what he didn't know is there was some criminals there waiting to beat his ass, take his money. A lot changed when that finally happened to my own father. And he came home all beat up, bloodied, bruised. My brothers and I, we made sure that didn't happen on that corner again anymore. It was 5 of us. I was scared to talk about it way back then. I'm not scared to talk about it now, because everything the trade just said is true. Well, I'll tell you what, after HB4 happened, there's a bar in my neighborhood on Biddison Street. Got robbed 17 times in a row before that bar owner finally decided he's going to call the Fort Worth police and make them do something about it. And the Fort Worth police officers had a sting. And that same day, one of those criminals put a bullet in Officer Garrett Hull's head. And Garrett Hull, a Fort Worth police officer, lost his life because immigrants once again were so scared they decided they weren't going to call the police anymore. So I remember a lot of famous, or not famous, but speeches that I remember here on the House floor, and I remember a speech that I gave one of our former members when he was running for speaker, running for speaker here, Dennis Bonin, when I begged him to be the speaker and not ever allow another piece of legislation to come about like HB4. He said he couldn't make that promise. And I remember telling him, well, I guess you have the blood of Garrett Hull on your hands again. Because it was that bill that made this come back. And this bill, without a doubt, is going to take us right back to those days when I was growing up as a kid, when people stopped calling the law because they're scared. And I know y'all have heard us say this over and over again. And y'all saw the passion that Representative Wally showed right here. And that's because he knows what it's going to be like. And I know that this vote's probably going to go the way we all expect it to go. But I hope if there's one thing that you do is you remember these words when you hear about that crime, when another officer, because the officers don't have a choice. I don't think Garrett Hull decided what kind of crime he was going to fight, whether it was against an American citizen or whether it was against an undocumented immigrant. But if he or she loses her life, his life, it's on every single one of us. So I'll ask you to vote no. And even if you don't, what I know is you're going to remember these words here today.